Testing, testing. Here I am again at Wickerson Studios. I am trying to learn a lot more about Revit, Rhino inside Revit, deal with Grasshopper, deal with the plug-in Revit within Grasshopper, within Rhino, within Revit. And this is the way I learn. I'm 48 years old. I teach. When I have a new idea, I hit it creatively and I just start thinking about what could be done. So what I did was I quickly discovered that there's this wonderful Revit uh, window here. And the way I kind of learned Grasshopper, and I've done it since the very beginning, is I open something up and I'm like, ooh, add beam. So I grab a little add beam, I put it down here, I let the defaults that are working work, and I figure it wants a curve, so I'll give it a curve. So I drew a little tiny curve here, and I think it's pretty cool to generate a nice little I-beam. And of course, not only generate that I-beam, it's nice to see it shot right into Revit. And at that point, I have an object that I can start manipulating and changing. I don't know how much CAD work I'm going to do in Revit, but I'm going to show you how playful this can be. Let's go down to the next item. I went in there and it was add column. Now, obviously, I thought a column would be something vertical, so it made sense to me that I would just generate, once I find out where this thing is, where is it? Oh yeah, it's right here. It's a column that's vertical, and you might wonder, well, why is it there? Why is it positioned there? Well, I generated a box. If I go here and take a look at everything that I have, a very long elongated box, which I can shorten and I can lengthen. That's not a big deal. The box can be made shorter or larger, and in doing so, you obviously don't want it too big. I think I'll bring this little edit snaps down to something like 10, and we'll bring that number down to about 7. And there we go. We have a nice little I-beam that's dancing off of, if I go here, right here in Revit, and it's always a little more, you'll see that I-beam will work off of a list item. So I took the box, I checked the edges. There's 0 through 11 edges, so that's 12 edges. And the last 4 are the vertical ones, so I can dance that around on that box. If you don't believe me, I can hold this one down and have a look at that. Actually, let's take the box and make it preview on. And there's the box in Grasshopper that's hovering there imaginarily. And then this count will allow me to run around on the edges and put the I-beam. A column, of course, columns want to be vertical, so it's like, no, we're not going to put it horizontal. That's not what columns are. So I like this kind of sensible kind of dialogue I'm having with Revit to say, okay, you've been doing all this foolish stuff. Mike, it's time to get serious and make some stuff the world needs. So jumping down there, I just took the same box, put 3 points in it, and I thought, okay, well, I could start playing with points and playing with types of adding components when it came to looking in Revit and saying I want to add a component, add another component. I thought, well, let's add like a flat. Does it look like a triangle? I was like, we'll just add a flat component. I have yet to figure this out, and I will figure it out. And when things come up orange, I just leave them orange because they're warnings that, Mike, you're trying to do a little demo here and get people working in these mediums. When you hit a little brick wall for a second, just take a minute and skip over it. So what I did was I grabbed a pentagon. And in grabbing a pentagon, I knew I could approach adding a floor and I could add a roof. So what I did was I just quickly moved that over in the Z direction, X direction. It shot over here, and that type generated a nice floor, which comes underneath it, which makes sense. And then I moved it up in the Z direction. So as you zoom down, it's now down here. And of course, it echoes over here in the Rhino, in the Revit side as well. And because I'm moving those objects up and down and choosing where I want to go, I can put on a roof and I can put on a floor. So I'm starting to make geometries and get a little more limited, a little more architecturally sensible with what I may end up making and creating. The last object here is a railing, which I thought was nice. I just left it where it was on the original pentagon, and comes back here and generates this railing. So then I'm like, okay, that's fine and dandy, but Mike, didn't you promise to be visiting GHPYTHON nodes? And I said, yeah, I was. But to make these scripts interesting and not like totally plagiarize and copy them, it's a simple script to generate circles on a surface. And I thought, well, if I'm generating circles on a surface and I was making railings out of those circles, I'll go in and write the script. And here it is. It's import Rhino Script syntax. I'm not trying to convert these functions over to Rhino Common right now and namespaces like Rhino Geometry, which it could very well do, but it's nice and compact, and I want to start finding out why I need a domain of U and a domain of V, and 0 is synonymous with U, direction, and local, I guess, Cartesian planes or whatever you want to call it. U and V count can be related to, U and V directions can be related to 0 and 1, and so you've set up your surface domain, generated that, and pretty much reparameterized it, and then I can find the middle point on it. But I also like this parametric control of dividing that node by the UMV count, and it doesn't have to be the same. You can come in here and you can double this, and I've done this 3 times in the past videos. So if I wanted my U count in another way, I'm going to leave it 5, 5, but I can play with that. What we're looking at now is this strange surface that I've imported, and I have control point controls on it, and the surface is here. I can move that around if I so choose. I think I'll keep it simple and subtle and not move it too far as I alter that. And it programs and runs the script again. And keep in mind, this is all happening over here, tasty over in Revit at the same time, which makes this a very fun intellectual exercise, if you want to call it that. And let's zoom out and take a look at where we are. Over here, I'll bring in the system, and there it is, generated. And you're saying, well, how do I get these 4 weird I-beams all flexing and bending across the sides, and why do the railings not show up on every circle of the divided circles on the curve? Well, that's pretty obvious. Revit says, no, it's not parallel enough. It's not horizontal enough. It doesn't meet the tolerances, and those railings aren't going to be generated there. So that's just something interesting to think about. My kids are coming home, so I'm going to have to wrap this up. Obviously, I use the same formula I was using before. I use the function evaluate surface. You have to remember to add one and add one here if you want to make it to the edges, because that's how dividing a surface works. And then you're going to run it through the iterations of du times I and du times j. Find your surface normals from the same information. Find your plane normals and add your circles at those plane normals, and then append the circles, and then have your circle list that's outputted. Well, once that's outputted, and I'll just tuck this over here. Actually, it disappears behind Revit, so there's no point really keeping it. I'll run it. Then out comes this system that not only have I debrep the original surface and said, let's take the edges and pop on the I-beams, which is what I did there, and that's why the I-beams are there. That's just post Python node and dealing with some of the cool tools that are in the Revit plugin. And then here, obviously, it goes red because I'm producing a lot of nulls, so I just cleaned my tree and I said, okay, wherever these are actually horizontal enough that they can run as a Revit railing component, insert them in there. So let's jump on here and go down here, elongate our Rhino screen, and shrink it back and say, okay, well, what happens if I take that point and I start to push that a little flatter and make it more sensible? Well, obviously, more of these little railings are going to pop up on that surface. So now you've got kind of a way of, CAD-based, program-based, physically making choices and optimizing this to what you want. Now, why you want to put a bunch of railings on the edge of these things and build geometries like this? Well, because you're a creative individual and you think maybe this will lead to something. And while I learn more and more about Revit, it's basically becoming accustomed to these window screens, playing one within the other, and living the game of life. So thanks for watching. That's 8 minutes. It's a lot of information. I did tuck a little GH node in there, so I'm happy I did that. So I'll put that in that series that I'm working on, and I'm excited to see where this ends up going. Time to put the chickens up and put the kids to bed and see how the day ends up. Thank you for watching Wickerson Studios.